Առանձին պետք է խոսեինք։
Չէ դու լուրջ եսքան միամիտ ես, թե ինձ ես էշի տեղ դն։
Ինչ գործ ունես Օլգայի հետ։ Վովը մեր տան տղեն է, այսի չեր ես անում դու։
Լությունա, որ ամբողջ ներաշխարհս քանդվում է, ոչ մի բան աչքից չի գալի։
Բա հոպ արած ոնց կարա թողի դու տենց ապրես։ Բա եթե ձեզանց էլ
պետք չի դու իրա փոխարեն ներողություն խնդրես ինձնից աղբերես։ Դու գիտես, որ ես ու դու իրար հարազատ աղբերների պես ենք։
Նախր հո երեք չեմ ծնվել, ամեն ինչ էլ հասկանում եմ։ Գրիշը ապակինվելու է ու
Այնտեղ կմնաս մինչև ես այդտեղ հարցերը լուծեմ։
Հոպար բանասա հասկանամ։
Մասիր, որ մոտակա մի քանի տարին դժվար
Somebody in that family has been lying to Hunan's face for years, sitting at his own dinner table, drinking his coffee, comforting him at his lowest moments, all while knowing exactly what really happened the night his first son died. And I am telling you right now, that secret is about to come out in the ugliest way possible. Before we go any further, tell me where you're watching from tonight. Drop your city in the comments. I read every single one myself, and I genuinely want to know how far this story has traveled. So don't be shy. Let's see how big this family of viewers really is. Let's rebuild the whole picture, because everything happening right now traces back to choices made years ago, choices this family thought were buried forever. Grisho survived that accident. Barely, and the surgery left his future hanging on a single word from a surgeon nobody in that family could control or intimidate. Մանանը sat beside him, carrying a guilt she'd hidden for months, the truth that in a moment of fear and weakness, she once considered ending her pregnancy, and now that same pregnancy has ended anyway, cruelly, without her even choosing it this time. And that kind of loss does not stay contained inside one person. It spreads through an entire household, like smoke through a house with no open windows. Volva, who spent this last stretch defending Davo against every warning her own mother tried to give her, finally cracked. She stopped making excuses for the flowers she couldn't explain, the meetings he thought she didn't know about, the secrecy that had become the wallpaper of their entire relationship. Losing her child stripped away the last reason she had to keep protecting a man who was never protecting her back. And once she said the truth out loud, once her mother heard it directly from her daughter's mouth instead of through rumors and suspicion, there was no putting that particular genie back in the bottle. Watch closely in the coming episode, because a confession like that does not stay contained to one conversation. It spreads to Davo's brothers, to his father, to everyone who has spent months pretending not to notice what was right in front of them. Now let's talk about Avo, because this man has become the walking scandal of this entire storyline, and he is not slowing down. Getting caught by Leo outside Olga's home should have been the wake-up call that made him disappear quietly into shame, the way any reasonable man his age, already married, already embarrassing his family once with a second household and a hidden child, would have done. Instead, in the next chapter of this story, expect Avo to do the opposite of what anyone sane would do. He is going to double down, insisting his feelings are real, insisting love doesn't check birth certificates or wedding rings, and that kind of delusional confidence from a man who has already proven he has no boundaries is not going to end in an apology. It is going to end in a physical confrontation, the kind Volva has clearly been holding back for far too long already. When that finally explodes,
and it is going to explode, the entire family is going to be forced to stop laughing off Avo's behavior as an old man's foolishness and start reckoning with the very real damage he has already caused. Then there's Aram, and if you have been paying attention the way I have, his sudden decision to ship his son off to Russia overnight, refusing to explain anything, refusing to allow a single question, should have set off alarms the second it happened. The timing is not subtle if you actually look at it closely. This order came down at the exact moment police confirmed they had solid evidence pointing toward the person responsible for running Macoons down and fleeing the scene. A father who is simply protecting his son from vague danger explains himself, stays calm, answers questions with patience. A father who is hiding his son from the law behaves exactly the way Aram has been behaving, sharp, secretive, irritated by the smallest question, rushing plane tickets through in the middle of the night like every hour matters. In the coming episode, that rushed departure is going to collide directly with the ongoing investigation, and Aram is not going to be able to keep pretending this was simply about protecting his son from unrelated danger. And speaking of that investigation, Remember the interrogation we already witnessed, where a suspect sat there insisting he knew nothing, playing innocent, while the investigator calmly informed him the evidence was already secured, that pretending ignorance was not going to save him from what was coming? That was not a resolution. That was a warning shot. In the next chapter, the arrest is finally going to happen, publicly, undeniably, in a way nobody can quietly smooth over with money or connections, the way this family has smoothed over every other crisis so far. And when that name becomes public, watch very carefully who in that family reacts with shock and who reacts with a suspicious kind of stillness, because genuine surprise and rehearsed composure look nothing alike once you know what to look for. Now, here's where this story takes a turn that is going to make you rewatch every single earlier episode with completely different eyes. Ina, the grandmother, the woman everyone has treated this entire time as simply grieving, gentle, too consumed by old sorrow to be hiding anything of consequence, is not who this family believes she is. Think back to every quiet detail she has dropped along the way, almost carelessly. The comment about Erna never truly letting go of Grigor, the way she always seemed to be sitting closest to Hunan during his most private, most broken moments, listening far more than she ever spoke. A woman that calm, that observant, in a family this explosive, does not stay that composed by accident. She stays that composed because she already knows how every story in this house actually ends before it happens. In the next chapter, someone in that family, likely Hunan himself, is finally going to ask her directly why she never said a word about who was really responsible for running Macoons down, why she let an entire investigation drag on for weeks, let accusations fly at innocent people.
Let her own son tear the country apart, searching for answers she could have handed him in a single sentence. And watch her reaction closely, because Ima is not going to collapse into tears the way Ashkin did in that hospital hallway. She is going to sit there with unnerving stillness. And what comes out of her mouth next is not going to be a simple confession about the accident at all. It is going to reach back further, to Raphael, to the night this family lost its first son, and reveal that everything Hunan has believed about that tragedy for years may not be the full truth. That the guilt he has carried, the overprotection he has smothered his remaining sons with, the ruthless control that defines every decision he makes, all of it might be built on a story that was never entirely honest to begin with. Think about what that means for a man like Hunan. His entire identity, the empire he built, the fear he commands, the way he moves through every room like nothing can touch him, all of it grew directly out of the guilt of losing Raphael, out of believing there was nothing he could have done differently. If Ina reveals that Raphael's death involved choices, people, circumstances the family deliberately buried, Hunan is not simply going to be angry. He is going to be forced to question every version of himself he has built since that night. A man who has spent years believing his hardness was born from an unavoidable tragedy, discovering that tragedy was shaped by decisions made by people he trusted, is not going to react with quiet sadness. He is going to react the way Hunan reacts to everything, with fury that has nowhere safe to land. And this time, the person standing closest to that fury is going to be his own mother. Meanwhile, Manane is still carrying her own private war, the guilt of once wanting to end a pregnancy that ended on its own anyway, cruelly without her ever getting the choice back. That kind of grief does not simply sit quietly in a corner of someone's mind. It leaks into every decision, every conversation, every glance toward Grisho lying in that hospital bed, uncertain whether he will ever walk again. In the coming episode, watch how that guilt starts corroding her ability to trust her own judgment. Watch how she begins questioning whether she even deserves the ending she's been fighting for. And watch how that fragility makes her far more vulnerable to anyone offering comfort at exactly the wrong moment. And Masha is not finished either. A woman who introduces herself with that much calm, that much certainty, standing in front of Grisho's actual wife and announcing herself as the mother of his future child, does not simply disappear because nobody welcomed her warmly. Expect her to escalate her presence in the coming episode, showing up somewhere she has no business being, forcing a confrontation Manan cannot avoid or delay any longer, turning what has been a quiet, private fear into something loud, public, and impossible to ignore. Then there's Nere, who agreed so smoothly to scale down her wedding, who told David she understood completely, who wore acceptance like it cost her nothing. Watch her face carefully in the coming episode, because a woman who swallows disappointment that fast rarely stays that calm underneath for very long, especially when she watches this family's chaos consume every ounce of attention, while her own life quietly shrinks in the background, treated like the smallest problem in a house full of much louder ones. And the grandfather, who has spent this entire storyline hiding behind humor, deflecting every serious question with a joke about coffee or showering, is not going to get to keep hiding much longer. His hypocrisy already cracked open once, when David asked why the old man tells everyone else to walk away from the McCoon's fortune while refusing to give up his own share. In the coming episode, expect that crack to widen. Expect someone to finally corner him and demand he answer for the difference between what he preaches and what he actually practices. Every single one of these threads is converging on this same collision point, the arrest that exposes who really ran McCoon's down, the secret Ina has been carrying about Raphael's death, Aram's frantic attempt to protect his son from consequences he clearly saw coming, Avo's disgrace finally reaching a breaking point, Hova's confession tearing through the family's illusion of stability, Manon's private guilt eating her alive from the inside while she fights for her husband's future. All of it is going to detonate in the same stretch of episodes, and none of these characters are walking away from it as the same people they were before. And just when you think this family has already survived the worst possible week of their lives, when Grisho is finally stable, when the arrest is finally made, when Ina's confession finally settles into silence, one more piece is going to surface that connects everything. A piece that reveals the person who really caused Raphael's death all those years ago is still alive, still close to this family, and has been sitting in that very house, drinking coffee, offering comfort, calming every explosive argument before it went too far, the entire time. That person is Ina's own brother, a name this family has not spoken aloud in over a decade, a man everyone believed left the country for good after Raphael's funeral, and the next episode is going to reveal he never actually left at all. Before we continue, drop your city in the comments if you haven't yet. I'm reading every single one tonight. This part of the story deserves it. Think back to every time Ina mentioned family that couldn't be here, or brushed off questions about her side of the family with a tired wave of her hand. Nobody in this story ever pushed her on it, because grief gives people permission to stay vague, and Ina used that permission for years to keep a name buried. In the coming episode, that name is finally going to surface, most likely through Dawa, since it is Dawa who has spent the most time quietly circling the family's old secrets, half by accident and half because something in him has always sensed the story about Raphael never fully added up. What comes out is going to reframe Raphael's death entirely. It was never a simple accident the way this family has told itself for years. There was a business conflict Hunan buried decades ago, a debt owed to Ina's brother that Hunan refused to pay, and a confrontation the night Raphael died that Ina witnessed, or was told about immediately after, and chose to swallow rather than destroy what was left of her family. She protected Hunan from a truth that would have broken him completely, and in doing so, she also protected the man responsible from ever facing what he did. Watch Hunan's face in this scene, because a man who has spent years believing he simply failed to protect his son is now going to learn someone he trusted made a choice that took his son from him, and that his own mother knew and said nothing for years, while he punished himself daily for a tragedy that was never entirely his fault to carry alone. This is the moment Hunan's control finally shatters completely, not from an outside threat, but from the person who raised him.